Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome once again to NOLA Theater Talk. My name is Alan Smason. My pleasure to be here with you. We always broadcast on Monday nights, a traditionally dark night for theater, and hopefully an opportunity for a lot of people in theater to come and join us. We broadcast on the NOLA Theater Folk Facebook group, on theatercriticism.com's Facebook page, not to be confused with the website, but the theater criticism.com Facebook page is used for promotions, etc. And also, I should tell you that we broadcast on my own YouTube channel, so you can check that out as well. Tonight we have an unusual talk because normally we're promoting a show that is about to bow or is perhaps in the middle of the production, and they wanted to take time out to promote it. But tonight, for some reason, I'm not quite sure why, I can maybe explain something. The producers at Rivertown Theaters did not want to have any discussion of the show in advance. So, and again, that's their prerogative. They put the show on. They don't necessarily need the help sometimes. They don't want the help. So we're happy to oblige them in that regard. Although, as I say, it's unusual. Most of the time, people want to have these things in advance. So I had the unusual situation of asking several of the performers who were in the most recent production that ended, unfortunately, its run yesterday, of Stephen Sondheim's Assassins. And I asked several of them to join me and talk to me about the experience that they had in putting on what is, to me, my favorite Stephen Sondheim guilty pleasure. And they may feel the same way after having been in. But I want to first off welcome everybody to the show we're going to have on. But the first person I want to bring in to the room is David Hoover, because David, welcome to the show. You played Sam Byck, and of course we're going to have some pictures we're going to show in a little bit of you in the Santa Claus outfit, etc. One of the least known of the various assassins who were depicted on stage.
True,
But you also had the unusual situation of having been the first director of a production of Assassins in New Orleans. You did that in 1993 at the University of New Orleans, which, of course, if anybody doesn't know already, you've been associated with them for many, many years, been the head of the film and theater department there. And so before I bring in the other two actors who we have, Michael John Smith and Vatican Lokey, who are going to be coming in to tell us about their experiences as the proprietor and John Wilkes Booth, I just sort of wanted to get your feeling about how it was to return to Assassins again, David.
Well, it was actually 32 years ago. So, or 30 years, I guess, to 23. So, honestly, it was like I barely remembered things I had done. In fact, when we were in rehearsal, I was like, didn't even remember how I dealt with certain things in the show. Certain things I did, but I remember certain characters, certain actors, and I remember loving the music. That hasn't changed. And I think one of my favorite things is always one of my favorite things about the show are the orchestrations for Assassins, because he mirrors the period of each assassin,
yes, he does,
which I just love. Wow. And I think it's sort of embedded in the orchestration, which is really fun to listen to. So that's one of the joys of it. But I loved it at UNO. It felt like it really fit our mission. It was a little edgy at the time, certainly.
Was there anybody in that production that we may remember now?
Oh gosh, I'm trying to think now. We go way back. So Paul Longstreth played the balladeer, and Paul is a local jazz piano player who pops up in my screen sometimes doing music around the city, but I think he's working everywhere now. He was in the show. Scott Brush, who was one of our great graduates, it was his thesis to play John Wilkes Booth, and went on to some great things and did a lot of shows at Summer Lyric, and had a great career. And Debbie LaFour played Sarah Jane Moore, and Debbie LaFour went on to be the head of the gifted and talented programs in St. Tammany Parish.
Wow.
And I think has retired recently, but so it had several people in it that that I can remember.
She retired and you're still going strong.
Exactly. Exactly. There's something wrong with that.
So I had a little bit of Glenn Livett, 14-year-old Glenn Livett that I put aside. So I'm having a little sip of this. I don't know what you're having.
I'm having what's called an Old Spice cup. Something new I'm trying. It's an Old Spice rum with a bitter that is of Crystal's hot sauce and sugar, a little lemon, and a little splash of club soda. That's what
Old Spice. Don't you put that on your face?
It's called Old Spice cup. So I guess it's like a Pins cup except spicy.
Well, you just mentioned music. And what better person to bring in than somebody who's associated with music for the longest time, probably, as the leader of the Marine Band, Michael John Smith. You had additional work in this as not only being the proprietor, but you also were the master of all the arms that were utilized, correct?
I was the armorer.
Yes. So again, that was another bit of a challenge. And let's just make the room complete. We're going to ask for John Wilkes Booth in this production to show up, and that's Vatican Lokey. Vatican, I admired your performance immensely. I thought everybody did a great job, but I think you and David both did fantastic jobs of assuming those characters so well. And I know that it's not an easy situation to assume a person who is, so far gone that he feels like he has to kill an American president. In Sam Byck's case, of course, he didn't use a gun, but he used, I think, a airplane. Right? That was what
he was trying to use an airplane. Now he did end up killing 3 people, but including one of the pilots of the plane. So again, not necessarily the nicest of people. And John Wilkes Booth, we know, of course, he was right after the Civil War had ended. He was bitter about the South's defeat, etc. And you can maybe tell me a little bit about how you approached your own character. But before you do, Vatican, it's like a very interesting situation for most people who are not familiar with the show. When you tell them what the premise is, and they say, "What? Really?" And they can't understand how this has any kind of sense of humor to it, attached to such a dark theme. However, I think anybody who sees it can automatically walk away and say, I get it. And Sondheim has one wicked sense of humor. And again, even playing somebody like John Wilkes Booth, there's a lot more to the character than just a person who felt that he had to assassinate Lincoln. So I'm going to ask you, Vatican, how you approached your work. I mean, I know you had sort of a depth of character there, and maybe you can fill me in on the process in which you assumed the first, as they call him in the show, the pioneer. How was that?
I approach every character like this, particularly in a historical character. The very first thing I do is go and do as much research on the person that I'm supposed to be playing. My greatest source of research was his sister Asia's diary, which had to be written in secret long after the assassination and his death, and was kept secret by family friends for over 5 decades before it could be published because it was considered so incendiary. In the book, Asia tells about who John Wilkes was before he became the infamous assassin. And what she describes of him describes a young man who was desperate to have his own career, was desperate to stand out from the shadow of his famous brother, Edwin Booth, and their father, Junius Brutus Booth, but also anxious to looking for something to be a part of, something to be a part of something bigger than himself. But aside from that, my greatest inspiration for the entire thing came from the current political situation that we're in concerning political extremism. No one ever sees themselves as the villain in their own story. They always see themselves in the hero. And I think that's exactly the same way that Wilkes felt leading up to what he did. Yeah.
And David, as I mentioned, Byck, not exactly the most lovable of characters. He's pretty much of a curmudgeon. But there's a lot of, there's a part in there where I know Sondheim was sort of making fun of himself. If you remember the part, Lenny Baby, he writes to Leonard Bernstein a tape, right? He's essentially typing out in a sense on a recording. He's talking to a tape recorder, Lenny, and he starts to talk to him about how he can improve what show, West Side Story, which Sondheim wrote the lyrics for, right?
Yeah, it's an interesting piece of meta theater that goes on there. I think when you're talking about that and the lyrics are in the dialogue, and all of a sudden there's that. Yeah, but you can tell he's a real admirer of Bernstein, certainly, and he did actually do a tape for Leonard Bernstein. He did a tape for all the people that are mentioned in the play and more. And the tapes are actually available on YouTube. You can listen to him. He's much calmer in the tapes than I played him on stage. But yeah, he's kind of mellow in the recordings.
And of all the characters, he's the one who curses the most, isn't he?
He curses quite a bit.
Yes.
I told our young child in the show, one of the first rehearsals, I said, my character curses a lot in this show, but that's not right? And he goes, yes, I know. I said, okay, good.
I'd like to add on to that, because of what he gets called in the show. For then on, after every show, as soon as he came off stage, we called him a little asshole. And he loved it.
Michael, let me see if we can back up a little bit. Had you known about Assassins before you read the script? Did you? I know was it something that was on your radar, so to speak, right? I mean, it was something that when you were talking to Gary Rucker about it, he said, "Did you read the script?" And that's how you kind of got onto it.
Well, it was. I thought I knew of it, but I was really in a world of ignorance. I was in our current society. Many times you read the headline and assume you know everything that's in the article. I knew of the show. I knew the title of the show was Assassins, and it was about everybody that had attempted or successfully assassinated a president of the United States. Knowing that, and I'd heard some of the music, just what's available on the soundtrack, but I'd never seen the show. Loved the music. And I because I get what Sondheim does, but as far as, and he wrote this it debuted, I think, 33 years ago. So when Gary approached me about it back in March, originally because he wanted me to be the armorer, to supervise the safety of all the prop weapons that were involved. I told him flat up, I'm like, are you sure you want to do this show in the current climate we live in right now? Because when he called me, I think we had 3 what are classified as mass shootings in 7 days. And he goes, have you read the script? Or he said, do you know the show? And I'm like, well, I know of it and what it's about. And he goes, have you read the script? I'm like, no. And he goes, read the script. I'm like, yeah, but he goes, read the script. So I start reading the script and I'm like, ooh, this is interesting. It does not, as you read through, it does not glorify any one of these people, any one of these characters in what they did. It doesn't put them on a pedestal. It shows them for who they were and what their mindset was and when they did and why they believed. And they actually, each one of them believed they were actually doing the best thing that they could for their country at the time. But it wasn't until I got to the part of, which is, I mean, all the others, if you look at these guys, it's comedic. Can I say this? They were batshit crazy. And that's what's...
Yes. Yes,
and
you
at
can.
one point when they're all in the room, it doesn't come right. When they're all in the bar, they're all in the same room. Of course, they did not exist at the same time in history, but they're all in my bar. They don't come right out and say it, but you get the feeling that each one of them thinks, I'm the only sane person in this room and everybody else is off their rocker.
Right, right.
But that aside, when it gets to the scene between John Wilkes Booth and Lee Harvey Oswald, and you read that scene, and it's like, we absolutely have to do this show. And the crazy thing is he wrote this show before we have what we now call as what we've classified as mass shootings or mass shooting. This happened before Columbine, but it kind of holds the one. I mean, it's not political. It does not glorify these anything. It doesn't preach anything. But I think if it does one thing, it holds a mirror up to the media of history, in that these people did a horrific act, but it's who they did in history that has made them immortal. The media of the time has made these people immortal. And Booth even says it. He goes, "I'm not a murderer. You want me to commit?" He goes, "No, murder's, what is it? A tawdry crime?"
Murder is a tawdry little crime born of greed. It's assassination.
Yeah.
Right.
And then he goes on to mention, who killed Caesar, right? And,
exactly. And he knew that.
Imagine that.
I think it holds, and it's not just the media of the current time, but it's the media over history has immortalized these people in the history books that carry this off. And a lot of times when we think of assassin, you think of a very well-trained, paid gun for hire. But the people that pulled off these events knew very little about the expertise of what they were trying to do. They believed immensely in what they were doing was right, but they did not know how to do it. And I think Sondheim does an outstanding job of leaving the story to the audience for you to make up your own mind.
And again, the book is by John Weidman. Again, brilliantly done. He worked with Sondheim on Pacific Overtures, I think. Something like maybe 15 years before this came out. So, we're talking about they worked. Is that about right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, but the point is that it's a really wonderful, very well-researched piece for presentation. Now, Michael, let me just make a couple of quick comments. All the Broadway theater lovers, musical theater lovers are cringing when you said soundtrack, when I know you meant original cast, right?
Yep.
And the second thing is they did have mass shootings, like Charles Whitman at the Texas Tower, et cetera, at the University of Texas, and other people like that. But they were far, far fewer than really. I think Columbine, you mentioned, was probably the opening of the spigot, and then of course all the others tragedies, them all followed. But the point is that we never thought about having all these mass shootings, or at least the psyche of America has not, as a general course of action, or perhaps whatever you might want to call it, craziness, that we never thought anybody could resort to that. But as the weaponry has gotten much more sophisticated, and as you probably would say, as more and more weapons have been received in the public, I know that the automatic rifle bans, et cetera, that were in place until a few years ago seem to be holding some of it back, maybe not all of it, but some of it. And of course, now that those bans have expired, there's a lot more gunplay out there, and we see it every day. And I think you had mentioned three shootings, mass shootings in a certain small amount of period there within a week or so.
Period back in March.
We discount it, so many times, how many times we have that. But again, as you said, most of these people who were involved in assassinations were not very sophisticated. They were opportunists who happened into a situation where they were able to get close to the president, much to the chagrin, I'm sure, of all the Secret Service agents that were there. Of course, Lincoln had no Secret Service, but it
was easy, to be honest.
Yes, but nobody would think about assassinating the president, because the president stood for so much in this country, and perhaps that's why he was the object, of Booth's desire to punish the North in some way, and that he saw that might be a way around it. But let's get back a little bit to the actual idea of the assassins. I know this was an idea that Charles Gilbert Jr. had, who I don't know anything about. But when this was originally presented at Playwrights Horizons in New York, I think the entire number of seats was like 198 seats per night. So fewer than 200 people got to see this show. And over the course of the maybe 2-month run or whatever it was that they had, less than 10,000 people got to see the show. You know, you all are probably one of the, you know, few production companies, Rivertown, and the NOLA project in 2008 here, who have done this show because of fear that you know, it's not going to be understood correctly, and that people are going to maybe avoid it because of its dark subject matter. But they do not glorify the assassins. In fact, many of the comments that are made, like by the balladeer, are that lots of madmen have had their way, but only for a day, and then the country gets back to where it should be. Right. So that message is pretty self-evident to me. In terms of playing the proprietor, Michael, tell me a little bit about how you approach that. In other words, what is his essential function? Because he essentially does hand each one of at the very beginning, each one of the assassins a weapon, doesn't he?
Yep. He's a proprietor at a carnival who runs the shooting booth. You know, hit the target, win a prize. His is hit the president, win a prize. And originally, my take there is so much that Sondheim's written into this. It's a masterwork. It's a master study. And as I watched it every night, I think I learned a little bit more. And I'm intersecting a lot of thoughts here right now, because there were when we closed yesterday, none of us were ready for this story to end. And I can speak for me. I wasn't ready for it to end because I was still discovering things that I'd seen it, but it hadn't clicked yet. So when I originally approached the role of proprietor after reading the script and knowing about the balladeer, I was thinking of, you know, the two little guys on the shoulder. There's a good guy on this shoulder of the balladeer, and there's the proprietor that's on the other side. That, you know, is of the two conscience or the psyches. But the more we got into the show, the longer it ran, I started to wonder, I think the proprietor looked up to Booth and what he started and realized, I'm going to take what Booth did. Maybe I'm going to take what Booth did and what he doesn't realize. And it's still the devil on the shoulder, but he's going to take it to another level. And he's always kind of watching. He interjects himself in several scenes where he's always kind of watching history develop. But I think it's still, as it mentions, where Hinckley had studied and written everything that Lee Harvey Oswald did. I think the proprietor had done quite a bit of study and history on what John Wilkes Booth was doing and was trying to pull history together in this way. And in the very last scene, the proprietor tips his hat to John Wilkes Booth and gives the stage back to him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's kind of where this was evolving in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to agree with you because I was the proprietor in the NOLA Project's production in 2008 at Muriel's with Gary as Oswald. And I went from it from much the same perspective. You know, he does respect Booth, but I think he also has this otherworldly knowledge because he's sort of like the arbiter. He's the one who's watching all of this, and he has prior knowledge. And I really feel like, and I felt like you felt like this too during the show, that you kind of enjoy all of this because you know what's coming. You know what's getting ready to happen. All you really have to do is sit back, pop the corn, and watch the movie.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, I didn't find out what your particular passion was tonight that you brought in, Vatican and Michael.
Well, I don't drink. In fact, I celebrated my second year of sobriety during the run of the show, and my friends were all there.
Congratulations. As I say, it doesn't have to be alcoholic. We did this during the pandemic when we first started, and it just seemed natural for us to have a drink together. And I said, you know, it's a nice natural icebreaker, so to speak. So what do you have?
Well, I'm drinking the same thing that I drank every night just before the show. I'm having my Barry's Irish tea with the cream. Thank you very much.
All right. Michael?
I've got a Weller's Grand Reserve. It's a wheated bourbon.
Oh, okay. All right. A man after my heart. Well, sometimes you have to have a little bit of the right antidote, for what ails you. Um, Again, David, you as Sam Byck have quite a number of scenes. You don't really sing, but you have a lot of scenes where I would say you spill out a lot of bile. It's very funny, but it's also a little sad about Byck. How did you approach that particular role? What did you do to research him?
Well, I read about him. I listened to the tapes, certainly. And then I kind of talked to Gary, and I was like, he was adamant that he not be over the top and, uber New Yorky, uber Jewishy, uber. He didn't really want any of that. He wanted to be more natural, whatever that means. And when I listened to the tapes, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. This won't work on the stage because he's just almost monotone and sort of no inflection in the tapes. Even he's very straight ahead. So it was about trying to find a balance of. I kind of thought of him as a little bit bipolar, like things would set him off. He'd be going along fine, and then there'd just be some little thing, and that would sort of set his wheels spinning. And so I think that's kind of where we played. And then, it's the two huge monologues they're kind of complicated because you're like, there's funny in here, and then there's not such funny, and then you're kind of like, all right, I kind of feel like Michael. I'm like, I felt like yesterday, I was like, I think I'm ready to open now. And so, I feel like I learned a lot during the run, and I thought, okay, I think I'm starting to get a grasp on what this is. And so I didn't realize how angry he is until I heard from some close people that were like, wow, he's a very angry fellow. And I was like, I guess I just, because that's not my tendency. And so I was like, I guess I never really thought of him as that sort of angry, but he has some deep-seated mommy and daddy issues, I think, for sure. And he's divorced too. And so, he has baggage.
Right. He's bitter, but he's also very funny, because he doesn't see how ridiculous he is,
Right.
I mean,
right.
And I think that the Santa Claus outfit is emphasize that particular part of, he doesn't believe in Santa Claus kind of anymore, that
yeah.
So, but
the only thing with Gary that I thought about that he won that battle, and rightfully so, because I got a lot of mentions, was eating the sandwich, which was something that I was like, Gary, I would push back on the sandwich. I was like, Gary, I can't just sit on stage and eat a sandwich. It's going to be like, the director in my mind is going pace.
Right.
And he just kept stopping me all the time. He's like, no, I just want you to eat that sandwich. Take as much time as you need.
And I am so glad he did. The first night I came out of the house and watched it, I had nearly swallowed my tongue. And that's what you were supposed to be eating.
We were crying in the wings, trying not to. I mean, if the audience could have heard us in the wings, it felt like we were tipping them off. But it was.
Yeah, it was that was the only thing and I didn't push back much. I was like, you're the director, I'm not. You can see what's going on. I can't. So
right.
Well,
one of the I'm sort of glad you brought Gary's directing up, because one of the things he forbade me to do, and not that he could actually control what I could write, but I agreed with him because I understood what he was trying to do there. But anybody who's seen the show before, or who's read the book, or perhaps even listened to one of the various original cast recordings, knows that Lee Harvey Oswald is the biggest assassin in it, in a sense, and that everything sort of revolves around him at the end, because he's the assassin that we all know of, that we all in our age all have had a common touchstone. That where were you when Kennedy was killed, et cetera, you know, and we can all reel that off, just like where were you when the man, you know, walked on the moon for the first time, et cetera, et cetera. So those sorts of things in history we know and we can actually connect to. To me, it wasn't that big a shock for people to know that Lee Harvey Oswald was going to appear in a show titled Assassins.
Yeah,
but he didn't want it to be revealed. And again, I know there's that one moment in the show where all the assassins are and I think it's what is that
another national
anthem, which is right where they talk about sure the mailman won the lottery. That's the last thing that's said by Sam Byck as he's walking off stage, and all of a sudden the assassins all part, and there's Lee Harvey Oswald, and there you are at the Texas Book Depository, and history is about to unfold again. It's a beautiful moment, but I didn't know whether or not it was that important to kind of preserve it in that regard. I don't know. Do you all agree it was a good thing to keep it out or not?
Well, I think the shocker there is, I mean, you know, he's going to be in there. He has to be in there, but you don't know where he's coming from. And there was a realization that when he came out, you could hear the shock in some people's faces. You know, you're going to see him.
Yeah.
But they didn't know he was the ballad in this story. They didn't know he was going to come from the balladeer. And some people that weren't following, you could see the portraits on the proscenium. We couldn't. But in that moment when they're leaving and all the other pictures go dark and Kennedy's comes up, all of a sudden there's the realization of the transformation from the balladeer to Oswald.
Yeah. Also very different. The very first production's the only thing I had to look at when I was directing the show. And they separated those two parts. The balladeer and Oswald were two different characters in the original production. Yeah. And so
I know it changed
in that I think really is a good change.
Yes. In 2004, when Neil Patrick Harris was the balladeer and became John Wilkes Booth, it was changed then. So I don't know when that change actually occurred. Vatican, you do all the research. Do you know when it was changed?
I believe it came around with the first production, not the original production, but the first production after that in the 2000s. I've forgotten which year.
2004, right?
I couldn't think of it. Yeah, that happened then, and it's to attach. It really attaches another national anthem and everything that the assassins are singing about. They turned on the balladeer because he's giving them all of this positive reinforcement that does not match up with their worldview, because literally everything that the balladeer is saying that he thinks is positive rings in the assassin's ears as being more injustice and one more reason for them to have justified their actions. When they turn on him and close in as a group and then all of a sudden separate, and there is Lee Harvey Oswald, society has created another assassin.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's going on.
That's pretty cool. Yeah. Well, again, I as I say, for me, it's a big moment, and don't mistake me, but I think that I could have written about it. I don't think it was that big a surprise that he's not going to be in it. But he didn't want me to mention anything about Lee Harvey Oswald at all, and so I honored that wish. I don't know whether or not I should have, but sometimes I kick myself sometimes for not, But again, in the spirit of cooperation, I mean, I'm not here to write these massive essays. I'm writing theater reviews, so I really didn't have a chance to really have more than just about an hour and a half in my seat, and then I had to go out and write about it. And he said, please don't write about that part of it. So I didn't. And
we again, appreciate it.
Yeah. So I don't. Now the show's over. Now I kind of regret myself for not writing about it, because the part that and again, he's not with us tonight, but Michael Civitano, that he did, is a very big role, and obviously bigger now since it was done in Neil Patrick Harris had done it in 2004. But I mean, I should say that it has a little bit of a New Orleans connection insofar as Michael Cerveris, who calls New Orleans his home now, a New Orleanian by choice, as we like to say, that he was actually the Tony Award winner for that. I think Neil Patrick Harris was also nominated, yes. but Michael won. Mm-hmm. And that was the first of his two Tony Awards. He of course won for Fun Home many years afterwards, but still fantastic work. And You know, I know. I'm sorry that we're not giving out Tony Awards for your performance, Vatican, because I think you did a very good job and should be applauded for your efforts.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. That's very kind. I've worked hard on this show along with each and every one of us, and no one harder than Gary to make this show happen. He has been working on this show since David Hoover first did it in 1993. And he's told us he went to several different productions. There were a couple of productions that were happening in different places around the state that he went to check out. And he did all of his research. He wanted his dream cast, his dream production of Assassins, and I really do believe that he got it.
Yeah.
The entire production, just from my own personal perspective, what Gary put together from the set to the brilliant casting choices that he made, all of the wonderful, this has been one of the most supportive, loving, engaged casts that I think I have worked with in decades. It was very hard to walk away from this show because of everything that Gary created and how much we all came to love each other and love the production and love bringing it to the audiences every single night. Even those nights when you looked out in the audience and all you could see was confusion, bemusement, and hurt because they just weren't aware of what they were getting.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's interesting, David, you mentioned, Gary, I think Vatican had mentioned it earlier, actually, but you had mentioned in talking with me earlier that Gary came to realize that you had done the actual. He didn't know it when he hired you, I guess, to take on the role of Sam Byck. That you had actually did he know that you had done it?
He had seen my production. He was a student.
He had seen your production. Okay, so he was still. You know, I think about Gary not being that. I don't want to say that old, but in other words, not necessarily having seen the early production because.
I'll say it. He's old.
Yeah,
I'll say
it. What does that make me?
I'll say it. Well, I mean, David, I keep telling people that my high school yearbook photo is a cave painting in France. So you do the math.
Yeah. But no, I mean, the fact is that you said, David, it was only a short run at UNL, right? Mm-hmm. So I just don't know how many people got to see it. I didn't get to see it, and I would have loved to have seen it. But to get back to, what was going on, when you were doing the show in 93, and then, of course, being brought back, to do a role in it now in like you said 20 years later, and now you're being directed by one of your former students, is that correct?
Yeah.
So how did that feel?
I have to say, I love it. First of all, we kind of have some of the same shorthand. That would be one thing. And I have the utmost respect for Gary. I did when he was a student. And I think he's greatly creative. He's an actor's kind of director because he is an actor. So it's just like the sandwich thing. I mean, he gets it. He understands. He sees the picture. And I trusted that and got the benefits to that. And so, no, and I think his vision for this was really good because one of the things I think that's frustrated him by productions he's seen is they set up the carnival thing and then they don't follow through with it. And that was something that was really important to him. And I thought it was masterful how he embedded that in everything that we did. And at the same time, he even said to me, he goes, I have stolen a bit from your show, your production. And I said, oh, what's that? Because I'm sure I don't even remember 30 years ago what it was. And that's when Sarah Jane Moore shoots her gun in the gun song and they take her gun away from her. And I was like, so in the wings, it was like, it always made me laugh because I was like, yeah, I thought it was funny 30 years ago. And I think it's pretty funny still here.
And she ends up with shooting like
she uses her hand.
Uses her hand.
Throwing the bullet, tossing them.
So,
but now that's another thing. I had invited one of the two female stars to show up tonight, but unfortunately they could not make it. But I mean, hats off to Lauren Smith, who played Sarah Jane Moore, and I'm Lynette Squeaky Flaw, I'm sorry, and also Candace Moses, who played Sarah Jane Moore. So one of the best things in the show, and I actually was sitting with somebody who had never seen the show before and was a little reticent. Assassins, I don't know. I said, one of the most beautiful love ballads ever written by Stephen Sondheim is sung between John Hinckley and Lynette Squeaky Fromm, and she looked at me like I was speaking some sort of foreign language.
Yep.
But that is just an incredible song. It's beautiful, unworthy of your love. I mean, again, I've seen it staged differently. They were separate. Usually they're right next to each other. Now, what was David? Do you remember what Gary's thinking was in keeping them separate like that?
I don't actually know what he was thinking. I think it's because he just wanted to use the space in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And but other than that, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they're not ever in the same air with one another.
Right.
But usually you see one off to the left, one off to the right, and they sing the duet together. I actually didn't take offense at it. It was great, Yeah.
In that particular scene, Hinckley kicked her out.
Yeah,
get out of here.
He has her earlier, so
go away, get out of here. But she comes back and
right.
See,
I think the staging is they're singing the same song in two different locations.
Right. Well, you could do that too from two different sides of the stage too.
Right.
But anyway, I mean, it was just a choice. There's no big deal. I mean, I don't necessarily find fault with it, but most of the times I've seen that particular scene done, it's done usually where they're together. Now maybe he does kick him out. I don't remember him kicking her out in the other ones, but
I think it has something to do with the way that both characters approach the song, because Lynette Squeaky and Lauren did such a good job with this. She squeaks for the rest of her life now to me.
Yep.
But when Squeaks was up there, and when you listen to the language, she is exalting Charlie. Everything is a worship of him, but a very high worship, coming from a worshiper who sits at his right hand, as it were. When you're talking about Hinckley's lyrics and you hear the way he talks, it's much more grounded and much more down to earth. He is supplicating himself to Jodie Foster in this.
Yeah, and essentially, she's trying to get Charles to be, get more attention on him, and possibly get him to be taken out of the jail cell, etc. And all that John Hinckley Jr. is looking to do is to get him noticed by Jodie Foster.
Yeah.
So yeah, their intents are definitely completely different. You're right about that.
You're right. It is an absolutely beautiful ballad.
Oh my goodness.
And it's funny.
Gorgeous.
Again, the orchestration, it sounds like it's a
Sounds like there's parts of the sound company
or something.
Yeah. Well, it reminded me of some of the best songs that the Beatles did.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just on musical level. And again, Michael, you probably have more ability to translate the notes, etc., and the composition. But to me, it's one of the prettiest things he ever wrote. And it's sung by two of the most incredibly non-expected roles to do a song like that, right? So it's just again, I think it's part of Sondheim and Weidman's genius in putting this show together, and part of why I love it. I'm a student of history, and I got the DAR award in my high school, and I mean I loved history, still love history. I minored in history at Tulane, but this to me is a thoroughly American musical. It's all about the dark side of America, and also the side of America that is very hopeful too. I mean, there are parts of what goes on in here that speaks to the reasons behind this kind of madness going on, and also to the reasons why the country is always going to be resilient and always be able to bounce back from these sorts of hiccups along the road, as it were.
And he writes that into the balladeer. The balladeer says those things. It's like, these things are going to happen, but it doesn't stop the story. The story's too strong. Madmen don't write the rules. Guns don't right the wrongs.
But it's very, very interesting.
The story will prevail.
Yeah. So we didn't get a chance to see some of the other people again tonight because they're not here. But Leon Jogash was played again.
Role can never be cast for anybody
Mitchell
else.
Samuel Cogan. He was also quite wonderful.
Yeah.
And again, he probably has his prominence in that the gun song, right? which is it takes a lot of men to build a gun, et cetera, et cetera. He talks about the miners who mine the steel, et cetera, that all the people who have a hand in shaping it, and he's quite good in that. And of course, the Balladeer has all of those ballads that he sings. I mean, first with John Wilkes Booth, and he ends up going on. And I don't have a picture of Ryan Nocito, unfortunately, that I never did get any more than just a few photos. But he was sensational.
Please talk about Ryan Nocito.
Now, Guiteau, Charles J. Guiteau, who was, I think, of all of the ones who were crazy, he was probably the most loony of all of them, maybe.
He was so delightful. Just marvelous to work with, and halfway through I had to come here because I'd only ever seen him in a couple of shows and nothing really of this magnitude and this depth. And I had to come to him afterwards and say, I think I may have underestimated you. You're brilliant in this role. And he just kept getting better every single night. He was just amazing. Yeah. I mean, the entire cast is amazing.
Every single night.
Ryan really made an impression. He made Insanity look like a lot of fun.
Now, I will say in the 2008 production, a person who I almost suspected would redo his role was of course, when you talk about Rivertown, who are you talking about? But Ricky Graham. And Ricky did a fantastic version of Charles J. Guiteau.
He was the reason to come and see the show, as far as I'm concerned.
Right. Well, I mean, you were in it. Gary was in it, but he stole the show, and it has that capacity to do that. Now, I don't think in this particular case Ryan was great, but I think this cast was so good that everybody contributed to it almost equally. I mean, I think that there were standouts, obviously Vatican, like you and David, but in terms of stealing the show, I think Ricky might have stolen the show in 2008. I think Ryan more or less was integrated into the cast. He was there and he did a great job, but I don't think it was as much a steal as it could have been. Now, what's the story though?
We were a fantastic ensemble. I have to admit, it's very difficult to do this show and find the level of talents that can perform so well together as a real ensemble where there's not really anybody that's stealing any focus because everybody is taking focus all the time at the exact same time.
Well said.
Yeah.
One thing I noticed too in what I consider a long run locally, over 5 performances, usually there's a moment of complacency when people come to the theater. It's like, we've done this before, we're doing it, and then things don't happen because there's complacency, assumption that it's going to happen, and then you get reminded, oh yeah, I've got to do this. And the last 3, this cast showed up every single night, and if it's possible, it got better every single night. There was never a moment of apathy ever. And it kept growing, and I think that's part of the discovery is we were still discovering Easter eggs within the show that I think this is what he meant. And it was growing.
And Sondheim, when you have songs like Another National Anthem where it's like, no, I didn't. Yes, you did. And it just moves around the stage. It's like you have to be on your game so that you don't drop that energy ball in a song like that. And he writes like that. I mean, that's a kind of a typical Sondheimian kind of a song. And so, yeah, you have to be, as the person that dropped the ball a lot in rehearsal, I would say you can't drop that ball or there becomes this little hole in it.
He says he dropped the ball. He dribbled it a little. He tossed it back.
Well, again, we remind everybody who might be out there tonight. We really are having a good time talking about Assassins. The show has unfortunately ended its run, but for the limited time it was on, it was a fantastic run. I wonder, do you think that they would have maybe had sellouts more had this not been titled Assassins? Had it not been a story about people who kill presidents or try to kill presidents?
I think when people are looking for entertainment, they're looking for a moment to get away. When you see Assassins, what's it about? People to kill the president. Yeah, that's not entertaining.
But to call it anything
got
else,
to have the courage to come to the theater.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and again, these are the sorts of things that we all sort of have passion about theater, because it's a moment in time compressed, and then you kind of let it go, and it's out there, you know?
I think the audience capacities for the third weekend validated that. I think there's a lot of people that maybe steered away because of the title of the subject. But after word of mouth, those last 4 nights,
Oh yeah.
we were near max capacity,
Good,
and,
good.
and people were like, I never knew, I never thought, I never did. And I think if this would have run longer, word of mouth would have done the same thing, which is the hope. I hope there's a remount. Right now, word of mouth, right now, people came to work today and heard about everything they missed. And they were, oh, when's it running? No, it's over.
It's over. Yeah. 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 So, but again,
it's a story that it's relevant to American history.
Yeah.
And again, I know we have about 10 minutes left before we have to end, but for those of you who missed seeing it, it was a fantastic show. For those of you who are looking forward to some more of the same, you know, they're going to be mounting several shows. I know A Christmas Story, Michael, is going to be on, right? That's that now.
Not a finger.
Yeah. And so you've got
nobody dies in that, by the way.
No. Well,
the furnace.
I think the lamp actually has a sad ending.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but other than that,
way to go, Alan! You just blew that.
No.
No.
Stone agent.
Let me tell you, David. If people have not seen A Christmas Story on what is it, Turner Classics or whatever it is that it comes on,
TBS and TNT.
TBS
24 hours a day.
No, if you haven't seen that movie yet, and by the way, the guy that wrote that was a New Orleanian, you know, the director of that. He was trying to remember his name. Bob Kane, is this, or Bob? It'll come to me anyway. But yeah, I
got the script right here.
But he directed the movie, and unfortunately, I have to admit that, you know, he had passed away. I think he was killed in an automobile accident, something along those lines.
Oh, yes, yes,
yeah, very tragic.
Strange.
Yeah. But again, Assassins
did die. Oh well.
Yeah, Assassin. I have a question. Did you put something in that tongue sandwich for David at all that he didn't expect one time, or no? Maybe
nobody would have dared do something like that. The worst
Vatican.
thing is, when Gary asked me, he said, "What do you want on the sandwich?" And I said, "Why don't you use bologna? That probably looks pretty close to tongue." And I said, "Get like some wheat bread." And he got white bread. And I'm like, "Gary, white bread like sticks in your mouth." And he goes, "Yeah, it'll be funny." That's not funny. That's not funny at all.
For you, no, we loved it.
So it's like,
oh well, you know, we don't want to give away all the secrets, but again, I have to think that when you all are working in those kind of close quarters and being with each other in the rehearsals, and the rehearsals started how long before? Because it seemed like this was very, very well done in terms of how much you put into it. So I'm assuming that this was not a short rehearsal period. How many weeks did y'all actually start it?
Oh gosh, I want to say it was at least a month, possibly even more, like 6 weeks.
Is that about right, Mike?
Well, we
Maybe
had the casting the scripts was well beyond, but actually coming to rehearsal was about 6 weeks.
Yeah.
But the people that were cast as the assassins knew well beyond that, so they had time to start doing their research and their choices.
Yeah. And I did meet your other half, David, at an event, and he said he had never seen you go into a script like you went into this one, that you had the pages like all over the house, that you were really getting into it.
I'm old. I'm very old, Alan. I don't memorize lines like I used to.
Well, in any event, it all came off pretty well, I have to say.
I would like to give praise to the cast from the role as the armorer, because
you were the weapon.
There were no live weapons on stage, but they were all fully functional prop
firearms.
weapons.
Uh-huh.
They were prop firearms. They were of the weight and of the caliber.
Oh,
they would accept real ammunition. And the biggest thing that I told everybody is as the armor, based on what happened on Rust, what happened on the set of The Rust was complacency and assumptions at the biggest part. And the biggest ask I had for all the cast was, I'm not going to load your weapons. I want you to load your own weapons so that you look and you see a blank and you're putting the blank into your gun and you know what you have in your hand at all times. And they all took that responsibility. And it's like, once you have this weapon, you don't hand it off to anybody.
Mm-hmm.
The challenge was in the very opening scene, I'm handing them weapons.
Yes, you are.
And they don't know what's in it. So we had a gun call before the house opened.
Oh.
We had a gun call. And the whole point of that was so they could look in their weapons and look at the chambers and that this is an empty gun. I'm closing it. I'm setting it on the counter. So they know the next time it was touched, I was handing them a weapon with nothing in it. But everybody took the responsibility seriously. And we had a non-eventful, very safe.
Okay, I'm gonna turn that praise back on you, Michael, because you set up those protocols, and they were wonderful, and it made all of us feel very comfortable and very secure in what we were doing. We had a buddy system on everything, which was just a smart way to do it. You weren't a jerk about it at all. You were very adamant about this is the way this needs to happen. It made me feel comfortable as an actor because we don't handle guns for the most part.
Right. Yeah.
I'm not a Marine. I don't handle guns.
Let's shut our mouths.
So no, I would throw some compliments back at you on that too, because you set up a great system that was very easy to follow and very very comforting.
Last little bit before we have to say goodbye. Gary worked with Benjamin Doherty on the set for the scenic design. I've seen Benjamin doing a number of things. He seems to be a jack of all trades. He's an actor, scenic designer. I think maybe even saw him doing sound design on something. He seems to have a lot of tricks in his suitcase there, so to speak. So I appreciate what he did. I thought that the set was wonderful. And also, I should mention the other people. We mentioned Michael Civitano as the balladeer, but you also had Nathaniel Richard as John Hinckley Jr. And we mentioned Ryan Nacito as Charles Vito. Who else do we? Ty Robbins, Giuseppe Zangara. And I think that rounds out the whole cast. So I wanted to make sure that, and Gary did the props. Now, when you say Gary did the props, did he do the prop guns? Was that, he got all that or where did
that was, I got all the weapons.
You got all the weapons. So he did all the props, but you did all the weapons. Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
And Jennifer DeLatte did the music. And again, I'm not quite sure how that all works out because, not sure. Yeah. Does she have to clip things that are there? How does that work?
Jennifer put in so much work. She did her own tracks long before we ever started musical rehearsals. She actually sang the more difficult tracks, sang each part, put them all together, put them in separately into a folder. We had all access to all of that long before we even started musical rehearsals. She is amazing.
Yeah, she's amazing.
And she was also occupied doing another show too at the same time, right?
A little bit.
So you got to say she's a busy bee.
She was dual hatting it, yes.
Darling.
Last chance, just a couple of words as you say goodbye to Sam Byck, John Wilkes Booth, and the Proprietor. I'd like to have each of you say just a couple of things about what it means to say goodbye to the role. David, you go first.
I would just echo something Vatican said earlier. It was such a lovely group of people. And as I've gotten older, that becomes more and more important to me as I do shows, is to be surrounded by people that are just positive energy that I like. And that was great.
All right. Wilkes, your turn.
I thoroughly enjoyed this production. I am so humbled and grateful to have been allowed to have worked with this amazing cast, with all of these people whom I love so very, very much. And for the last time, Miss Effie Gurman and I wish you break a leg.
And finally,
That was
Michael.
the nightly ritual. Him and Miss Effie, that was the ritual every night. And there was one night that I was out of place when he came around. I was like, no. I gotta get here. Okay, now I'm ready.
Now we're ready.
My wish is, as this story is retold by those people who saw it and those people realizing what they missed, is that this cast does a remount so that the people that wish I could have seen it, they get the chance with this cast.
All right. Well, maybe your wish will come true. You never know. Christmas is only around the corner. We'll see. David Hoover, Vatican Lokey, Michael John Smith. Stick around just for a couple of minutes. So I'm going to say goodnight to everybody else out there. And again, thank you once again for joining us on NOLA Theater Talk. It's a quick hour, isn't it, from time to time? Again, those of you who are wondering, we broadcast this on the NOLA Theater Folk Facebook group, on the theatercriticism.com Facebook page, and on my own YouTube channel. And want to remind you that these are all archived. So if you missed it tonight or you came in late or whatever, you can go check it out again. Again, my name is Alan Smason. Thank you for joining us tonight. And as always, I'll see you at the theater.